In late February 2026, the United States and Israel launched Operation Epic Fury. It was the most massive joint military offensive in the Middle East since the 2003 invasion of Iraq. The opening wave was devastating. Within hours, 900 synchronized strikes neutralized Iranian naval assets and resulted in the death of its highest leadership, including Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. The speed of these operations was driven by a reliance on advanced AI targeting systems designed to identify and process thousands of targets per hour. To military planners in the Pentagon and the IDF, this opening wave represented a high watermark for conventional weaponry, a display of absolute kinetic dominance. But the reliance on automated targeting introduced a catastrophic blind spot. On the first day of the war, a missile strike hit the Shajareh Tayyibeh Girls' School in Minab after the system misidentified it as an adjacent naval base. The resulting civilian casualties alienated international partners and provided Tehran with a potent propaganda victory at the start of the conflict. While the US and Israel focused on a war of airspace and firepower, Iran had prepared a radically different, asymmetric battlefield. Iran's response, dubbed Operation True Promise 4, bypassed American air superiority by shifting the conflict to the sea. This map of the Strait of Hormuz reveals the geographic reality. By deploying sea drones and mines into this choke point, Iran neutralized U.S. naval groups. The result? A 52% spike in U.S. gasoline prices. Trapping 1,500 vessels immediately paralyzed the global energy market. Iran demonstrated that weaponizing geography could disrupt global supply chains, regardless of who controlled the airspace. To restart the global economy, the U.S. military launched Project Freedom, using guided missile destroyers to escort stranded tankers through the strait. But the mission was halted not by Iranian missiles, but by a decision from Riyadh. Fearing Iranian retaliation against their own oil infrastructure, Saudi Arabia and Kuwait denied the U.S. military access to their airspace and bases. Without access to these regional bases, the U.S. Navy lost the land-based air cover required for the mission. The abrupt pause of Project Freedom highlighted a shift where Gulf states prioritized their own domestic stability over Washington's strategic goals. As the external military offensive stalled, the strain of a prolonged war triggered a societal unraveling inside Israel. Massive protests broke out in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. Demonstrators demanded a state inquiry into the intelligence failures of October 7 and expressed outrage over military draft exemptions for ultra-Orthodox students, while the IDF faced severe troop shortages. This internal fracture was exacerbated by legal peril. Prime Minister Netanyahu's corruption trial resumed in the middle of the conflict, just as the International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants for senior officials for war crimes in Gaza. These compounding crises left the state increasingly isolated and struggling to maintain a high-intensity, multi-front conflict on its own. Back in the United States, the traditional bipartisan consensus regarding military support for Israel began to break. Prominent media figures on the right began openly criticizing the alliance, steering the Republican base toward an isolationist America First posture that questioned the cost of Middle Eastern interventions. Public broadcasts began detailing the mechanics of pro-Israel lobbying in Washington and reevaluating the historical failures of the 1996 clean break doctrine. This shift in the informational domain effectively limited the administration's ability to sustain the domestic political will required for a prolonged conflict. By early May, the United States was forced to rely on a ceasefire brokered by Pakistan and China to stabilize energy markets and prevent an economic depression. The 2026 war showed the limits of conventional hardware in securing a global choke point, especially when a superpower's own